Picture a striking, solitary image in your mind. We're looking at a stark, sepia-toned landscape.
Mhm.
The earth beneath our feet is entirely dry, right? Cracked into these geometric patterns, stretching out toward distant, rugged hills under a blazing, white-hot sun.
And no water anywhere.
Right, absolutely no water anywhere. And right in the foreground, planted perfectly upright in this dead dirt, is a single long wooden oar.
Just sticking straight out of the ground.
Exactly. And because the sun is so intense, that oar is casting this incredibly sharp, long shadow across the barren ground.
It's an incredibly haunting visual to start with.
It really is. So I have to ask you, the listener, have you ever read a classic story, maybe one you thought you knew inside out from childhood, and suddenly realized you were looking at it from completely the wrong angle?
Oh, it's the best feeling.
Right, like you were reading a straightforward, literal adventure,
Yeah.
but it was actually a highly complex secret code the entire time.
It completely shifts your paradigm. You realize the text has been operating on a frequency you weren't previously tuned into.
Yeah, exactly.
The story you thought you knew was just the surface level camouflage, really, for something much older and much more dangerous.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sources we are looking at today are going to ask us to do exactly that with arguably the most famous adventure story in Western civilization.
Homer's Odyssey.
Homer's Odyssey. We've got this fascinating stack of research revolving around a brilliant paper by Constantine and Cocculus, and it's titled Odysseus as Hierophant.
It's a fantastic paper.
It really is. And we're also weaving in deep linguistic and archaeological studies from scholars like Gregory Nagy, Douglas Frame.
Lucy Goodison is in there, too.
Yes, Lucy Goodison and Nano Notos. And the mission of our deep dive into the source material today is to explore a radical thesis.
A very radical thesis.
We are looking at the argument that the Odyssey is not merely an epic adventure about a tired warrior trying to get back to his couch after the Trojan War.
Right. He's not just a guy who got lost at sea.
Exactly. Instead, it is a meticulously preserved, cryptically encoded manual for a Bronze Age mystical initiation.
Framing it as an encoded manual is vital here. I mean, to truly understand Odysseus' actual role in this epic, we really have to look past the superficial trappings of the heroic age.
The armor and the monsters.
Yeah, we need to temporarily set aside the sword, the bow, the armor, all of it. We need to shift our focus to the ritual pit, the sacrificial blood, and the secret, carefully guarded language of the Hierophant.
The revealer of sacred things.
Exactly.
Let's start with that word, actually, because it's the linchpin of this entire theory. Hierophant.
It's a heavy word.
It is. And I'm going to be honest, when I hear ancient Greek priest, my brain immediately goes to a very specific Hollywood-style image.
So sure, the white robes.
Yes. Pristine white robes, standing in a giant marble temple in Athens, surrounded by columns, sacrificing a bull to Zeus, while a massive crowd of citizens watches in the broad daylight.
Right, the classic civic religion visual.
Exactly. But the sources are drawing a very sharp line between that kind of civic priest and a hierophant. They're not the same job description at all, are they?
A very sharp, a very necessary line. Cocculus actually grounds this distinction in the literal etymology of the word itself.
Oh, I love etymology. Let's break it down.
Let's do it. So hierophant comes from two ancient Greek roots. First you have hieros, meaning sacred or holy.
Okay, hieros, sacred.
And then pheno, meaning to reveal, to bring to light, or to make appear.
To make appear, wow.
Right. So a hierophant is quite literally a revealer of sacred things. And this is fundamentally different from a standard sacrificial priest, which the Greeks called a hiereus.
A hiereus. Okay, so what did a hiereus do on a Tuesday? If they aren't revealing sacred things, what is their actual function?
A hiereus was essentially a civic administrator of religion. They were generalists.
Right.
They maintained the temple grounds, they managed the treasury of the sanctuary, and yes, they presided over those public Olympian sacrifices you pictured earlier.
So they handled the civic religion that happened in the daylight.
Exactly. The rituals meant to bind the community together and appease the gods of the sky and the poetically.
I'm picturing like a public official, almost like a mayor of the temple.
That is a very fair comparison, actually.
Yeah.
But the Hierophant operates in a completely different register. I mean, a different world entirely.
How so?
The Hierophant is associated with mystery cults, with the chthonic realms.
Chthonic
Meaning the underworld, the earth, the subterranean spaces. They do not operate in the bright sunshine of the civic square.
They're in the dark.
Exactly. They control access to hidden knowledge. Their primary function is to initiate the uninitiated into secrets that literally alter their understanding of life and death.
Wow.
And the most famous historical example we have of this is the Eleusinian Mysteries during the classical period in Greece.
Oh, I've heard of the Eleusinian Mysteries. Those were the secret rituals dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, right?
Yes, exactly.
Ones where if you revealed what happened inside the temple, the penalty was literally death.
Yes, the secrecy was absolute. In Eleusis, the Hierophant was the singular supreme authority who could enter the inner sanctum.
And that sanctum was dark, right?
Pitch black. It was an enclosed space called the Anactoron. And at the climax of the initiation, in the total dark, the Hierophant would suddenly reveal the sacred objects, the hiera, to the initiates,
Just out of nowhere.
often accompanied by a sudden blaze of light. It was this highly orchestrated, terrifying, and profoundly moving psychological experience.
Designed to what? Remove the fear of death.
Precisely. To show them that death isn't the end.
Okay, so the paper is arguing that Odysseus is acting like this guy in the dark room in Eleusis.
Exactly.
But there is a timeline problem here that I'm tripping over.
Oh, the chronological gap.
Yeah. The Eleusinian Mysteries, at least in their highly organized, famous form, are from the classical period. We're talking hundreds of years after the world Homer is describing.
Right, the classical era versus the Mycenaean era.
Exactly. We're talking about the Iron Age versus the Bronze Age. So how can Odysseus be a Hierophant if the institution of the Hierophant, as we know it, didn't even exist yet?
That is the critical temporal shift we have to make here. And it is exactly where the archaeological sources become so important to our deep dive.
Okay, lay it on me.
The paper argues that the ritual logic we see in the Odyssey predates the highly organized, institutionalized Eleusinian mysteries by centuries.
Centuries. Wow.
We have to look at the archaeological evidence from the Minoan and Mycenaean periods deep in the Bronze Age to see where this role actually originated.
And what does that evidence show?
It strongly suggests that this function of a human mediator, someone intentionally triggering a divine encounter, was deeply embedded in Bronze Age culture long before Eleusis was ever built.
Okay, the sources bring in Lucy Goodison's work to illustrate this, and
Yeah.
her research is absolutely fascinating.
It really is groundbreaking.
She looks specifically at Minoan seal stones. For context, if you're listening, imagine a tiny, intricately carved piece of semi-precious stone, right?
Maybe the size of a large coin.
Yeah, or like a knuckle
Yeah.
used to stamp an impression into clay. And the scenes carved into these tiny stones are, well, they're pretty wild.
They're not exactly your standard Sunday service.
Not at all. It's not people standing politely in front of altars. You have worshipers outdoors, physically wrestling with nature to force a divine epiphany.
They are remarkable artifacts, and they really give us a window into a very physical, visceral theology.
Visceral is the perfect word.
Goodison points out that a recurring motif on these Minoan seals is a worshiper actively pulling at the branches of a tree, or physically leaning over and embracing a large, smooth boulder.
A beetle, they call it.
Yes, a beetle.
Yeah.
And the composition of the carving is crucial. In the visual language of the seal, this physical, ritualistic interaction with the tree or the stone directly results in the appearance of a separate, hovering figure.
A god.
A divine presence, yes. The worshiper isn't just praying and hoping someone listens. They are applying a specific physical ritual mechanism.
Like pushing a button.
Exactly. They're acting as a proto-hierophant. By interacting with the sacred object, they are initiating a controlled ritual that mediates an encounter with the divine. They're literally pulling the god into visibility.
Pulling the god into visibility. That connects so perfectly to that bizarre oak or stone linguistic puzzle in the Odyssey.
Oh, yes. Book 19.
Let me set the scene for this because it always confused me. We are in Book 19. Odysseus has finally made it back to his own palace in Ithaca, but he is disguised as a filthy, wandering beggar.
Right, nobody knows who he is.
He secures a private interview with his wife, Penelope, who doesn't recognize him. She is trying to figure out who this stranger is, and she demands to know his lineage. But the specific phrasing she uses is so strange.
It's very peculiar.
She says, "Tell me your lineage, where you're from, for you're not from a rock or from an oak of ancient origin."
Not from an oak or a stone.
I remember reading that in college and thinking, what a weirdly specific idiom. Like, why would anyone think a beggar grew out of a rock?
It sounds absurd on the surface.
But Goodison is saying it's not a joke about his hygiene or his stubbornness, it's a fossilized phrase.
It is a linguistic fossil. It perfectly preserved the memory of those very Bronze Age betel and tree rituals we just saw on the Minoan seal stones.
That is wild.
And we know it was a recognized idiom because variations of this exact phrase pop up in other archaic Greek literature.
Right, Hesiod uses it.
Yes, in the Theogony.
Yeah.
Right after he claims to have met the Muses on Mount Helicon, he catches himself rambling and says, "But why all this about oak or stone?"
Basically saying, why am I talking about oracles? And Hector uses it in the Iliad, too.
Right before his death.
Right before he gets killed by Achilles, he realizes he can't negotiate. He laments that he can no longer talk to Achilles from a tree or a rock, whispering like a young man and a young girl.
Goodison argues that over time, the phrase diverged in its everyday usage. It came to mean something akin to, let's get down to business, or where do you really come from?
It became a metaphor.
Exactly. But if we trace it back to its origin point, it consistently points to a time when trees and stones were the primary mediums for accessing special knowledge, wisdom, and oracular inspiration.
So when Penelope asks Odysseus this on a subtextual level, the poem is invoking the language of ancient ritual mediation.
Right as the true master of ritual mediation sits before her in disguise.
Oh, that is so cool. I am trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of this transmission, though. You're saying generations of poets passed down this highly specific phrase about a tree-hugging ritual.
Yes.
But did Homer, or, the collective tradition we call Homer, composing hundreds of years after the Minoan civilization collapsed, did he actually know he was writing about a Bronze Age hierophany?
That's the million-dollar question.
Like, was Homer out in the woods hugging boulders, or did he just think it was a cool, spooky idiom to use in a poem?
What's fascinating here is the absolute resilience of the oral formulaic tradition. This is a crucial concept to grasp in our deep dive. We do not have to prove that Homer, living in the Iron Age, fully understood or actively practiced Minoan Badal rituals.
Okay, why not?
Because the bardic tradition, the passing down of these epic songs generation after generation, sung by bards at feasts, operated on a strict metric system.
The dactylic hexameter.
Precisely. The epithets, the repeated phrases, the sequences of actions were structurally bound to the rhythm of the poetry.
So the rhythm of the poem literally locked the words in place.
Yes. The tradition preserved the specific phrasing, and more importantly, the underlying logic of the rituals, even if the daily practice of those rituals had long since evolved or faded from society.
That makes so much sense.
The poetic language itself acts as a container. It perfectly preserves the ritual structure, like a prehistoric fly trapped in amber. The poet might not know the species of the fly, but they pass the amber down completely intact.
That is a great way to visualize it. Think about it like walking into a modern, trendy coffee shop in a downtown city.
Okay.
You walk in to get a latte, but you notice the back wall has a massive reinforced steel vault door with a combination dial. And the ceilings have this incredibly ornate, heavy crown molding.
Right, you instantly know what it used to be.
Exactly. You don't need to see a bank teller to know, oh, this building used to be a 19th century bank. The architecture proves the original function, even if the current inhabitants are just steaming oat milk.
That's brilliant. That's exactly it.
That's what scholars like Goodson and Cocculus are doing with the verses of the Odyssey. They are reading the architecture of the language to prove what the building used to be.
A very grounded analogy. And what is compelling is that we see this architectural evidence literally as well as linguistically.
Like physical ruins.
Yes. If we look at Chrysanthi-Gallou's research on Mycenaean cults of the dead, she shows us that their actual funerary architecture was designed specifically for this kind of mediated encounter between realms.
The sources focus heavily on the Mycenaean tripartite tombs. Walk us through what it would actually feel like to stand in one of these structures. How did it work?
Well, many elite Mycenaean tombs were built with a very deliberate three-part plan. First, you have the dromos.
The trunk.
This is the approach, a long, often descending pathway cut into the earth. It is a physical transition away from the world of the living.
Like walking down into a canyon.
Exactly. And at the end of the dromos, you encounter the stomion.
Which translates to mouth, right?
Yes, the mouth. It serves as the physical doorway, but conceptually, it is the threshold between the living and the dead.
The boundary line.
And beyond the stomion is the chamber itself, the subterranean residence of the deceased. This architecture was not designed merely for disposing of a body and sealing it away forever.
It wasn't just a graveyard.
No, it was engineered to facilitate ongoing, controlled communication with the ancestors.
And the mechanism for that communication was something called the bothros.
The bothros is key. It is a sacrificial pit.
A pit in the ground.
Right. Gallou highlights discoveries like the hollow at Grave Circle A in Mycenae. When archaeologists examine the stratigraphy there, meaning the layers of earth built up over time, they find evidence of repeated use over long periods.
People kept coming back.
Generations of people were returning to this specific pit to pour liquid libations down into the earth, down to the dead.
They're essentially pouring a drink down a tube to the underworld.
In their cosmological view, yes. But access to this pit was not a free-for-all. The custodians of these sacred spaces would have strictly controlled access to these rituals.
They didn't just let anyone walk in with a cup of wine.
Absolutely not. They were the mediators. They were functioning as hierophants, standing at the stomion, at the threshold, facilitating the connection between realms, ensuring the libations were poured correctly and the ancestors were appeased.
Okay, if we take this Bronze Age understanding of the Hierophant, the mediator at the threshold, the master of the Bothros pit, and we apply it to the narrative of the Odyssey, we arrive at the absolute crux of the epic.
Book 11.
The moment everything hinges on. Book 11. The Nekyia, the journey to the underworld. Because, as the sources point out, Odysseus doesn't just wander down into Hades looking for directions home.
No, not at all.
It is a strictly choreographed initiation, and the person who gives him the blueprint, the source code for this initiation, is the sorceress Circe.
Circe is a profoundly important figure in this context. And, we often misunderstand her simply as a witch who turns men into pigs.
Right, the Disney version.
Exactly. But we need to look at her credentials. She is uniquely qualified to transmit this high-level mystery knowledge. First, she's the daughter of Helios, the sun god.
That's a big deal.
Huge. Second, she resides on the island of Aya. The text explicitly tells us that Aya is located at the eastern edge of the world, where dawn has her dancing places, and where the sun rises.
So she lives on the boundary line of the cosmos.
Yes. Her divine solar lineage and her residence in this highly liminal cosmic space confer upon her an absolute supreme authority over ritual knowledge. She's a master of boundaries.
And she makes it very clear that Odysseus cannot just pack up his ship, leave her island, and sail back to Ithaca.
He wants to, but she stops him.
Right. He wants to go home, but she stops him. She tells him, first, you must complete a journey. But the specific Greek verb the epic uses there is doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting. It's the verb teleo.
Teleo is a word we need to track very carefully throughout this entire discussion.
Absolutely.
On a mundane, everyday level, it can mean simply to fulfill or to complete a task. If you finish building a wall, you might use a form of teleo.
Like crossing something off a to-do list.
Right. But in a religious context, it carries a very heavy, specific ritual weight. It means to initiate into religious rites or to perform sacred rites. In fact, the root form is used in the word telit, which translates directly to initiation.
Initiation. So when Circe uses teleo, she isn't saying, hey, run this errand for me before you leave.
No.
She is essentially telling Odysseus, you must undergo a formal religious initiation. She says, do as I command you. It's hieratic instruction.
She is acting as the master hierophant, initiating Odysseus into his own future role.
And her instructions are not vague guidelines. I mean, go to the underworld is vague. What she gives him is something else.
The procedural precision she demands is exactly what marks this passage as liturgical preservation. It is detailed to the level of engineering.
Yes.
She tells him precisely what he must do when he reaches the edge of the underworld. First, he must dig a brothros, a pit, and she gives him the measurements. Exactly a cubit deep and a cubit wide.
Wait, why a cubit? Why not just dig a hole?
Because in ritual, arbitrary action invalidates the process. A cubit is a specific human measurement, the length from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger.
Oh, interesting.
It grounds the ritual space and the physical reality of the human body performing it. After he digs the pit, he must pour libations, and he must pour them in a highly specific three-stage sequence.
I remember the sequence. First, he has to pour a mixture of honey and milk.
Right.
Next, he pours sweet wine. And third, he pours water. And then he has to sprinkle white barley around the edge of the pit.
And while he is physically executing this sequence, he has to manage his speech perfectly. He must make solemn promises to the dead.
He has to bargain with them.
He has to bargain with them to secure their cooperation. He promises that if he successfully returns to Ithaca, he will sacrifice his best barren cow to all the dead.
A barren cow specifically.
Yes, and to the prophet Tiresias specifically. He promises the best black ram of his flock. Only after making these vows does he actually slit the throats of the black ewe and ram that Circe provided, and even the physical posture of the sacrifice is mandated.
Right. He has to turn the heads of the animals down toward Erebus, the dark gloom of the underworld, so the blood flows directly into the pit. But what is Odysseus doing with his own body?
He is instructed that he must look away. He must turn his own face back toward the streams of the river, back toward the world of the living.
Wow.
He cannot gaze directly into the chthonic abyss while the transfer of life force occurs.
It sounds less like a magical spell and more like trying to handle highly radioactive material in a nuclear reactor core.
That's a great way to put it.
You don't just wing it, you follow the protocol. Step 1, step 2, step 3. If you pour the water before the wine, or if you dig the pit 2 cubits wide instead of 1, the containment field fails.
And you die.
Right. The ritual breaks. You are exposed to something lethal, and you don't get your prophecy. He has to execute this flawless sequence perfectly.
That is a very fitting comparison. The underworld is fundamentally hostile to the living. The ritual is the containment field that allows a living man to interact with the dead without being consumed by them.
It's life support.
Exactly. That procedural fidelity is what separates the Hierophant from a mere participant. And the ultimate test of his execution in the Nekyia comes down to how he uses his primary tool, his bronze sword.
Okay, this is where my childhood understanding of the Odyssey gets completely upended. We are so used to seeing Odysseus as a warrior. When he draws his sword in Hades, my instinct, based on every movie I've ever seen, is to think, oh, he's going to fight the ghosts.
He's going to hack his way through the underworld.
Right, but that's not what he does at all.
Not at all. He uses the sword not as an instrument of combat, but as an instrument of ritual control. We have to understand the mechanics of Homeric Hades.
How do they work?
The dead are essentially mindless, flitting shades. They have no substance, no memory, no logic. The blood pooling in the bathros is the active agent in this ritual. It contains the vital life force.
The battery power.
Yes. The dead need to drink the sacrificial blood to temporarily regain their consciousness, their ability to remember who they are, and their ability to speak truthfully.
I see.
Therefore, whoever controls access to the blood controls the revelation.
He becomes the literal gatekeeper of consciousness. He sits by the pit with his drawn sword, and he decides which ghost gets to wake up and speak.
And managing this requires an immense, almost superhuman amount of psychological self-control. As a Hierophant, Odysseus must master his own profound human emotions to maintain the integrity of the ritual sequence.
Because it's not just random ghosts?
No. The prime directive Circe gave him, the whole reason he is down there, is to speak to the blind prophet Tiresias first. But as he is guarding the blood, fending off the swarms of random souls, a specific shade approaches the pit.
It is his own mother, Nekyia.
Yes.
And he didn't even know she had died until that exact moment. He left her alive in Ithaca 20 years ago. The emotional devastation of seeing your mother's ghost approach a pit of blood must have been absolutely overwhelming.
Unimaginable.
The instinct to let her drink, to hug her, to talk to her.
It would have been paralyzing for an ordinary man, but he doesn't let her drink. He holds his own mother back at sword point.
Oh my God.
He intentionally delays their reunion, enduring that emotional agony, to ensure that the prophet Tiresias drinks first. That suppression of personal grief for the sake of strict ritual sequence is the definitive proof of his competence. He proves he is a Hierophant, not just a grieving son.
Okay, if Odysseus is controlling the blood perfectly with his sword, and no ghost can speak without drinking the blood, the system seems totally secure.
Very secure.
So how does Tiresias actually get the prophecy across without the other ghosts interfering? Does Odysseus just wait for Tiresias to show up?
Well, he wouldn't have known how to process Tiresias' prophecy if it weren't for a loophole Odysseus accidentally left open back on Circe's island.
A loophole?
A loophole named Elpenor. Elpenor's sudden appearance at the bathros before Tiresias even arrives is one of the most mechanically vital moments in the entire epic.
Let's give some context on Elpenor, because he usually gets treated as the comic relief or the quintessential red shirt of antiquity.
Right, the guy who dies first.
He was part of Odysseus' crew. But the morning they were supposed to sail from Circe's island down to the underworld, Elpenor, who had gotten very drunk the night before and decided to sleep on Circe's flat roof to cool off, wakes up confused by the commotion.
He's hungover.
Very hungover.
Yeah.
He forgets where he is, misses the ladder, unheroically falls off the roof, and breaks his neck. And because the crew is in such a terrified rush to leave for Hades, they just leave his body lying there in the dirt. They don't bury him.
And that lack of burial is the crucial mechanical loophole. In ancient Greek cosmology, burial is the required mechanism for a soul to fully cross over into Hades.
Oh, so he's stuck.
Because Elpenor is unburied, his soul exists in a fractured, liminal state. He is hovering between realms. This means he is the only shade in the entire underworld capable of speaking clearly and truthfully without needing to drink the sacrificial blood.
Wait, really?
Yes, he completely bypasses Odysseus' sword control. He doesn't need the blood, so the sword doesn't stop him.
He essentially hijacks the ritual sequence. He speaks first, and he begs Odysseus to come back and give him a proper burial. But he doesn't just say, hey, please throw some dirt on me. He gives Odysseus incredibly specific, demanding architectural instructions.
He does. He tells Odysseus that when he returns to Circe's island, he must burn his body along with his armor. Then he must build a mound of earth, a timbos, at the very edge of the sea.
Now, timbos, okay.
And finally, he instructs him to take the oar he used to row with, an aretmon, and plant it upright on top of the tomb as a sema.
A sema. We need to put a pin in that word because it is going to echo through the rest of this deep dive. Let's really break down what a sema is.
We must. The scholar Gregory Nagy has provided foundational analysis on the dual, almost paradoxical meaning of the word sema in Homeric poetry.
What does it mean literally?
On a basic literal level, sema simply means a sign or a signal. But Nagy demonstrates that within the formulaic system of the epic, sema simultaneously carries a much heavier meaning, tomb.
Tomb, like a grave?
But not just any grave. It specifically denotes the tomb of a hero that serves as the focal point for a future hero cult.
A hero cult. Let's clarify that for the listener. This isn't just a memorial plaque. In ancient Greece, people actively worshiped the graves of dead heroes, right? They believed the hero's spirit still had power in that specific geographical location.
Exactly. A hero cult was a localized religion. Worshippers would come to the sema to pour libations, offer sacrifices, and seek protection or favor from the localized spirit of the hero.
So when Elpenor asks for a sema on the coast,
He's asking for a physical sign that also functions as a recognized sacred tomb. And what's fascinating is the verb Elpenor uses when he demands that Odysseus plant the oar. He says, accomplish these things for me. But in the original Greek, he uses the phrase telta timoi telesai.
there's our word again, telesai, the root of telio, to ritually fulfill or initiate.
Exactly. Elpenor is not asking for a favor from a friend. He is demanding a ritual completion from a Hierophant. And Odysseus responds by promising, I will fulfill and complete these tasks.
And he actually does it, right?
We know he keeps his word. Later in Book 12, the text explicitly confirms that Odysseus executes these exact steps. He heaps the tomb, raises the stone column, and plants the well-fitted oar on the very top of the mound.
I understand that Odysseus proves he can follow instructions, he builds the tomb perfectly, but from a narrative perspective, why do we spend so much time on this drunken crewmate's burial requests right before the most important prophecy of Odysseus' life?
It seems like a distraction.
It really does. We are waiting for Tiresias, the greatest seer in myth, and we have to listen to Elpenor talk about an oar. Why?
It is a matter of what Cocculus calls hermeneutic necessity.
Hermeneutic necessity.
Yes, hermeneutics being the theory and methodology of interpretation. Think of it this way. The poem is about to deliver a highly encoded, deeply esoteric prophecy through Tiresias.
Okay.
If the poem just delivered it right away, neither Odysseus nor the audience would know how to decode it. The poem needs to teach us how to read the signs. Elpenor provides the explicit, literal, exoteric grammar of hero cult building.
He gives us the vocabulary list. He teaches us that timbos means mound, aretmon means oar, sema means sign tomb, and telesai means to ritually plant it.
Precisely. Elpenor provides the baseline training. He uses unambiguous terms because his goal is straightforward. He wants a physical tomb on a beach that passing sailors will see and recognize.
Right.
It's about public kleos, public glory and memory. He wants people to see the oar on the hill and think, a sailor is buried here.
So Elpenor gives us the explicit grammar, and this training is immediately put to the test because right after Elpenor leaves, Tiresias finally approaches the pit, drinks the blood, and he speaks in nothing but esoteric encoded prophecy.
Tiresias is a unique figure in Greek myth. Circe had already warned Odysseus that Persephone, the queen of the underworld, granted Tiresias a special dispensation. He alone, among all the dead, retains his
Noos.
We generally translate nous as functioning mind or cognitive logic, but it goes deeper. He retains his absolute cosmic awareness. This allows him to see the tapestry of fate, what the gods have determined for Odysseus.
And Tiresias lays out the immediate future. He warns him about the dangers of eating the cattle of the sun god. He predicts the bloody state of affairs waiting for him in Ithaca with the suitors.
Yeah.
But then he gives Odysseus a bizarre set of instructions for what he must do after he reclaims his home after the suitors are dead. Tiresias says, I will tell you a sign, a very clear one, and it will not escape your mind. And the Greek word he uses for sign is sema.
And here is where the training from Elpenor becomes vital. I want to put the two sets of instructions side by side. Tiresias uses identical vocabulary to Elpenor.
The exact same words.
He talks about a sema, he talks about an oar, an eretmon, and he talks about the physical act of planting it in the ground, pexis. But the context has radically shifted.
How so?
It is no longer literal, it is deeply symbolic. Tiresias tells Odysseus he must take his well-made oar, put it on his shoulder, and walk inland. He must travel so far inland, away from the sea, that he reaches a population of people who have never seen the ocean.
People who eat their food unsalted because they don't even know what salt is.
Exactly.
And he has to keep walking until a traveler crosses his path and mistakes the oar on his shoulder for a winnowing fan.
The winnowing fan, right?
For those who might not know, a winnowing fan is an agricultural tool, like a large shovel, used to toss grain into the air so the wind can blow away the light chaff while the heavy wheat falls to the ground.
A farmer's tool.
Yeah, and that is the moment. That is the sema, where Odysseus is instructed to plant the oar in the bare earth and offer beautiful sacrifices to Poseidon.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to ask, why the shift? Why does he have to take an oar inland until it is misunderstood?
That is exactly my question. I'm trying to understand the psychology of this. If Odysseus just wants to appease Poseidon, the god of the sea, why not just build a massive, beautiful stone monument on the beach in Ithaca?
Right, why hide it?
Yeah, why take a perfectly good piece of maritime equipment and walk for weeks until some farmer is confused by it?
We have to understand how the ancient mind categorized the world, and how an object transforms from a tool of utility into a sacred relic.
Okay, walk me through that.
When an object exists in its native environment, an oar among seafarers on the coast, or a winnowing fan among agrarians inland, it is merely a tool. It is a mundane utilitarian function. It is meant for labor.
Right, you row with it or you toss wheat with it.
But when an object physically crosses the threshold between two completely different cosmological worlds, from the marine realm to the agrarian realm, and two different populations interpret the exact same well-made wooden object differently,
It loses its original meaning.
its utilitarian meaning is fractured. The confusion over its utility strips away its mundane identity. It sheds its everyday purpose and becomes elevated. It becomes a purely ritual object.
Oh, wow. It becomes a marker of a liminal threshold. It spans the two worlds without belonging to either.
Precisely.
I want the listener to really think about this for a second. Think about how symbols completely change their meaning based on who is looking at them.
It's all about perspective.
For the uninitiated inland farmer, Odysseus is just a weird guy carrying an oddly shaped winnowing fan. There's no magic there.
Just a strange encounter on the road.
But for the listener who paid attention to Elpenor's vocabulary lesson, and for Odysseus who has attained this new level of consciousness, that misunderstanding is the spark. It is the foundational marker of a sacred site.
And we must look closely at the sequence of how the oars are planted. Sequence is everything in ritual.
Right, like the libations in Hades.
Exactly. In Elpenor's explicit, literal instructions, the oar is planted last. You burn the body, you build the mound of earth, and then you stick the oar on top as a passive label. It just identifies what is already there. Here lies Elpenor, a sailor.
It's the cherry on top of the tomb.
Exactly, the cherry on top. But Tiresias instructs Odysseus to plant his oar first in the bare earth before anything else is built. He must plant it and then make the sacrifices.
Which changes everything.
This inversion of the sequence changes the function of the object entirely. Odysseus's planted oar isn't a passive label for a dead body. It is the primary reference point.
The anchor.
It is the architectural anchor around which his entire future hero cult, his own sema, his own tomb, will eventually be constructed. By planting the oar in the bare earth, he is consecrating the site.
Tiresias is essentially handing Odysseus the architectural blueprints for his own immortalization.
Really is.
He even concludes the prophecy by saying that death will eventually come to Odysseus from the sea, a gentle death in his old age, and that his people around him will be blessed. The Greek word used is olbioi.
And Nabi has shown, through extensive textual analysis, that olbioi isn't just a generic word for being happy or wealthy.
What does it mean?
In the specific context of hero cults and mystery religions, it is a highly charged sacral term. It denotes the specific state of bliss, grace, and divine protection that comes to worshippers who are in physical proximity to the sacred.
So it's a religious blessing.
It is the reward of the initiate. Tiresias is prophesying not just a peaceful retirement for an old soldier, but the ultimate efficacy of Odysseus' future cult. His tune will bless his people.
So what does this all mean for Odysseus in the immediate term? Let's take stock. He has successfully descended into the underworld.
Check.
He has executed Circe's flawless ritual without breaking the sequence. He has managed the terrifying power of the blood with his sword.
He'll back his own mother.
Right. He has learned the literal grammar of the dead from Elpenor, and he has decoded the prophetic mysteries of Tiresias. He has passed the ultimate test.
By passing the test of the Nekyia, Odysseus achieves noos.
Noos.
We briefly defined noos earlier regarding Tiresias as functioning mind or logic, but we need to expand on that. Noos is a higher consciousness. It is the supreme cognitive recognition necessary to grasp the absolute reality of a situation.
It's like waking up from the Matrix.
Essentially, yes. It is the ability to see the hidden machinery of the world. And according to Douglas Frame's groundbreaking linguistic research, attaining noos is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for achieving Nostos.
Nostos. That's the word we usually translate simply as homecoming. It's where we get the modern word nostalgia, the pain of wanting to return home. We usually think of Nostos as a geographic journey. I left Ithaca, now I'm going back to Ithaca.
Yes, the geographic interpretation is the surface-level reading. But Frame made a massive breakthrough by examining the deep Indo-European root word from which both Nostos and noos derive.
Oh, they come from the same root.
They do. The root is nes. And linguists track how nes is used across a variety of ancient Indo-European mythologies, not just Greek, but Vedic and others.
Then what does it mean?
Frame demonstrated that the primitive foundational meaning of nes is not merely a physical trip from point A to point B. It means a return to light and life.
A return to light and life. Wow, that completely reframes the entire epic. If Nostos means a return to light and life, then Odysseus isn't just a guy trying to get back to his living room.
Exactly. It means Nostos is an ontological state of being. You must acquire noos, the higher consciousness, the mind capable of perceiving the sacred, in order to experience Nostos, the literal return from the darkness of death back into the light of life.
So you have to wake up before you can go home.
You cannot have the homecoming without the cosmic awareness.
And we see this played out geographically and cosmically in the text too, don't we? The scholar Nano points out the intense solar imagery layered throughout this sequence.
The solar imagery is everywhere.
Odysseus physically travels to the dark west, to the very edge of the world where the sun sets, to enter Hades. It is a journey into darkness. But when he finishes the Nekyia, when he completes the ritual, where does he return to?
Back to Aia.
He sails his ship back to Circe's island, Aia, and the text explicitly reminds us that Aia is in the east, the home of the dawn and the rising sun.
His physical journey on the ship perfectly mimics the daily cosmic journey of the sun. Mycenaean connects this directly to Egyptian solar religion, which heavily influenced the Bronze Age Mediterranean.
Oh, like Ra.
Think of the daily cycle of the Egyptian sun god Ra. He descends into the underworld in his solar barge every night, battles the forces of darkness and chaos, and is reborn triumphant in the east every morning.
That's a perfect parallel.
The ancient audiences listening to the Odyssey would have instantly recognized this cosmological mapping. Odysseus isn't just a sailor blown off course by a storm. His catabasis, his descent into the dark, and his anados, his ascent into the light, legitimizes him.
He has literally died in a symbolic sense and been reborn with a new level of cosmic awareness. He went into the darkness as a traumatized warrior, and he has returned to the light as a fully realized Hierophant. He understands the mechanics of life and death.
And he is going to need every ounce of that hierophantic awareness. Because when he finally makes his Nostos, when he geographically returns to Ithaca, he doesn't just find a messy house and some unwanted house guests.
Right. He finds a disaster.
He finds a profound cosmic imbalance. His home has been overrun by the suitors, over 100 arrogant young men who are violently consuming his estate, slaughtering his livestock, and pressuring his wife, Penelope, to marry one of them.
On the surface, they are a literal pest problem, a very dangerous one. But if we are reading the text as an encoded manual, They represent a much deeper structural threat to the order of the world.
A threat to the light itself.
Which brings us to the central, most explosive thesis of this entire deep dive, the Mnesterophonia, the slaughter of the suitors in books 21 and 22.
This is where Cocculus' paper fundamentally reshapes how we read the Odyssey.
It changes everything.
The traditional, surface-level reading views the slaughter of the suitors as an incredibly violent, cathartic action movie climax. The hero sneaks in, gets his bow, locks the doors, and finally gets his bloody revenge.
Very Hollywood.
But Cocculus argues that beneath the narrative of vengeance lies a cryptic, meticulously inverted replication of the Nekyia ritual.
The slaughter isn't just a tavern brawl, it is a meticulously executed religious purge. And the parallels are stunning. The source provides a detailed breakdown labeled Table 2 that maps the elements of the underworld ritual directly onto the slaughter in the Megaron, but with inverted results.
We need to walk through these because it's mind-blowing. First, let's look at the space itself.
Okay, the space.
In Book 11, the ritual space is the Bothros, the pit located at the extreme liminal boundary at the edge of ocean and Hades. It is an open, natural space at the edge of the world. In Book 21, the ritual space becomes the Megaron, the great enclosed dining hall of Odysseus' palace. But it isn't just a room. Odysseus gives specific, tactical instructions to his loyal servants, Eumaeus the swineherd and Philœtius the cowherd, to lock the heavy wooden doors and seal the courtyard gates.
Oh, so he traps them?
He artificially creates a sealed, inescapable, defined threshold space, mimicking the strict containment of the pit.
Wow. Next, consider the active agent, the blood. In Hades, the sacrificial blood of the animals is what activates the dead. It brings them out of the dark. They have to drink it to gain consciousness and speak.
Yes.
But in the locked Megaron, the blood of the suitors does the exact opposite. It silences the living. It sends them into the dark. When Odysseus shoots Antinous, the leader of the suitors, his blood pours out in a thick jet as he falls, immediately extinguishing his life and his voice.
And look at the physical props, the items scattered in the scene. In the Nekyia, Circe instructed Odysseus to pour a deliberate 3-stage libation of honey, milk, wine, and water around the pit, and to respectfully scatter white barley.
Right, a very formal offering.
In the Mnesterophonia, as the suitors are struck by Odysseus' arrows, specifically Antinous and later Eurymachus, the text vividly describes their sudden death throes.
It's very graphic.
As they collapse violently over the tables, their golden wine goblets fall from their hands, pouring wine across the stone floor, and their bread and roasted meat scatter into the dirt.
Oh, wow.
The poetic imagery of the falling food and poured libations perfectly mirrors the intentional offerings made at the edge of the underworld pit. The narrative violence masks the ritual imagery.
It's the same visual, but chaotic and inverted. And what about the sequence control? In Hades, Odysseus used his drawn bronze sword to physically control the ghosts, deciding who got to drink the blood and when. He managed the flow of the dead.
Yes, his sword was the key.
But how does he control the sequence in the Megaron? He can't just point a sword at 100 armed men.
He controls it through the chain of hierophantic instruction, using the secret language he learned. He makes promises of future rewards, wives, homes, possessions to his servants, Eumaeus and Philœtius, to bind their absolute loyalty.
Oh, just like Circe told him to make promises to the dead in Hades.
Exactly, to secure their cooperation.
Yeah.
But the sequence control itself relies on our crucial encoded word, sema.
The sign.
Yes. When he assigns the servants their tasks to lock the doors and secure the weapons, he dictates the precise order of entry and action. He says, first I, you after me, but let the sema be made.
Let this sema be made.
He uses the sema as the operational signal to coordinate the procedure. He's managing the flow of the living into the ritual space, just as he managed the flow of the dead.
This brings us back to the most fascinating linguistic thread in the epic, the verb teleo, to ritually complete or fulfill.
This is my favorite part of the paper.
Cocculus tracks how this word is tossed around by almost every character during the build-up to the slaughter, during the famous contest of the bow, and there is this incredibly dark irony in who uses the word and how they use it.
The usage of teleo acts as a linguistic barometer for who possesses noos consciousness and who does not. First, Telemachus, Odysseus' young son, uses it.
Telemachus sets up the 12 iron axes for the contest and tries to string his father's massive bow himself. He's young, he is an unformed initiate.
Right, he doesn't know what he's doing yet.
And he says to the crowd, let's complete the contest using the form ecteliamen. He actually almost strings it on the 4th try.
But Odysseus stops him.
Odysseus subtly nods his head, stopping his son before he succeeds or fails. The master Hierophant controls the sequence, preventing the inexperienced initiate from triggering the ritual prematurely.
Then the suitors start using the word. Antinous, the most arrogant and cruel leader of the suitors, directs his men to grease the stiff bow over a fire to make it pliable so they can complete the contest.
Again with the word.
Later, when they all fail to string it, he suggests they pause, pour libations, and sacrifice to Apollo to bring the contest to an end, again using ecteleomen.
But they don't know what they're saying.
Antinous and the suitors are using the word in total ignorance. They entirely lack news. They think they are participating in a marital competition, a mere athletic contest to win Penelope's hand.
They think it's a game.
They do not realize they are carelessly invoking the vocabulary of a chthonic ritual that will require their own blood as the ultimate sacrifice. The ritual register of the word is completely lost on them. They are playing with fire in a powder keg.
But then, Odysseus reclaims his bow. He reclaims his word. He gets the bow in his hands. He strings it effortlessly. And the text gives us a beautiful detail here. It says he inspects the bow this way and that, checking it for worms or damage.
And the Greek phrasing used to describe how he inspects the bow is the exact same phrasing used to describe how he measured out the pit in Hades.
It's all connected. He shoots the arrow cleanly through the 12 axes, and then he leaps up to the broad threshold of the megaron.
The threshold, the ultimate liminal space between the inside and the outside, life and death.
He rips off his filthy beggar's rags, standing there bare-chested, armed, and terrifying, and he declares to the stunned room, "This indeed an inviolable contest has been completed." Ektetelestai.
Ektetelestai.
He reclaims the word and he closes the trap.
It is an epiphany in reverse. Let's think back to Eleusis. In the mystery cults, the Hierophant reveals the sacred object to the initiates in the dark to bring them comfort and dispel the fear of death.
Right.
Here, standing at the threshold, Odysseus strips away his disguise and reveals himself as the terrifying, divine-like sacred presence.
The revealer of sacred things becomes the terrifying thing revealed.
Yes. He is the Hierophant, and the suitors are the profane, disrespectful non-worshippers experiencing a violent, fatal epiphany. They're terrified by the revelation of the sacred.
And the text gives us a massive clue about the true metaphysical nature of the victims through their very names. This isn't just about bad house guests. This is about cosmic principles clashing.
Etymology is destiny in Homer.
Let's look at the first man to die and the last man to die. The first is Antinous.
Right. Antinous literally translates to anti-noos. He is the literal embodiment of anti-mind, the direct opposition to higher consciousness, restraint, and cosmic order. He's chaos.
And how does Odysseus kill the antimind? He shoots him right in the throat, silencing him instantly, just as Antinous is casually raising a beautiful golden goblet of wine to his lips.
It's so sudden.
The arrow pierces his neck, the blood shoots through his nostrils, the wine goblet falls. The ritual purge begins.
And if Antinous represents the opposition to mind, we must look at the last victim to be dealt with, Melanthius. Melanthius was the treacherous goatherd who mocked Odysseus in his disguise and actively tried to sneak weapons from the storeroom to arm the suitors during the battle.
His name is equally symbolic, isn't it?
It is. Mel comes from melos, meaning black or dark. Anthias relates to a flower's bloom or blooming. Melanthius means blooming darkness.
Blooming darkness, which is the direct diametric opposite of what Odysseus represents. Frame told us that Odysseus's Nostos is rooted in nes, the return to light and life. So Odysseus is the active agent of light, and Melanthius is the spreading, blooming darkness.
Exactly.
And Melanthius doesn't just get shot with an arrow like the others, he suffers a horrific, gruesome dismemberment by Telemachus and the loyal servants. They cut off his nose, his ears, his hands, his feet, and feed his genitals to the dogs. It is shockingly brutal.
It is brutally violent, and to modern ears it sounds like excessive sadistic cruelty. But Cocculus argues it is not gratuitous narrative violence. We have to consider the ritual knowledge of the ancient audience listening to the poem.
Right, they would have understood it differently.
This extreme systematic dismemberment is likely a poetic representation of an apotropaic ritual.
Apotrachic magic, magic designed to turn away evil.
Yes, a defensive magic rite, designed to completely eradicate a supernatural threat. To ensure the permanent return of the light, the physical effigy of blooming darkness cannot just be killed, it must be utterly unmade, dismantled piece by piece.
Erased from existence.
It is a necessary eradication of cosmic pollution.
And we know this entire bloody spectacle is divinely authorized, right? It's not just a mortal taking petty revenge because someone ate his cheese.
No, the gods are watching.
Because right before the slaughter begins, when Odysseus plucks the string of the bow and it sings like a swallow, Zeus drops a single, loud thunderbolt from a clear sky. And the narrator explicitly calls it a sema. Zeus struck great signs, revealing them.
It's all coming together.
The poem is layering the signs. We've gone from Elpenor's physical wooden sema on the beach, to Odysseus's procedural sema at the doors, to Zeus's divine sema authorizing the ritual purge from the heavens.
The layering of authority is complete. The mortal Hierophant has the explicit backing of the supreme Olympian. The cosmos is aligned with his action, and once the blooming darkness is eradicated and the anti-mind is silenced, the ritual purge must be formally chemically closed.
Which brings us to the aftermath, the restoration of cosmic order. The slaughter ends, the hall is filled with corpses, and the text says, the deed had been fulfilled. Tetelestai, the final framing of that ritual word.
Tetelestai, it is finished.
Then Odysseus doesn't rest. He demands that the servants scrape the coagulated blood off the floor with hoes and shovels. He executes the unfaithful maids who slept with the suitors to remove the moral pollution from the house. And then he asks his old nurse, Nekyia, to bring him fire and sulfur.
Sulfur was widely recognized in antiquity as a powerful purifying agent. He is fumigating the Megaron, chemically and spiritually cleansing the space after a massive, unauthorized sacrifice of human life.
Sweeping away the pollution.
It perfectly mirrors the closure of the Nekyia, where Elpenor's eventual burning and burial at Aia formally completed those lingering ritual obligations and sealed the door to the underworld.
And then comes this incredibly cinematic, evocative final image. The hall is full of sulfur smoke. Nekyia goes and gathers the loyal women of the household. They emerge from their quarters, each carrying a burning torch, and they walk through the hall toward Odysseus. They surround him, embracing him and kissing his head and shoulders.
This raises an important question. What does this specific visual of women carrying torches toward a victorious figure signify to an ancient audience?
What does it look like to them?
We've just witnessed a massacre, and immediately following it we have women carrying fire emerging into a purified hall. It is the exact recognizable iconography of a ritual procession.
Like a parade.
It evokes worshippers celebrating the culmination of a mystery rite. They are celebrating the return of the hero, the return of the light, and the definitive restoration of order.
And we can actually link that return of light to a specific time of year, can't we? The sources mention a brilliant observation by the scholar K. Kretler regarding a passing, almost throwaway comment made by the swineherd Eumaeus earlier in the epic.
Yes. Earlier in the story, while they are sitting in the swineherd's hut, Eumaeus complains about the weather and the terrible state of affairs, and he mentions nights exceeding divine order.
Nights exceeding divine order.
Kretler convincingly argues that this points to a specific astronomical event, the period of the winter solstice. This is the time of the longest, darkest nights of the year, when it feels to an agrarian society as though the natural order is breaking down, the sun is dying, and the darkness is winning.
The solstice, the turning point of the year, the exact moment when the sun stands still and the days finally agonizingly begin to lengthen again.
Exactly. So on a narrative level, Odysseus has cleaned his house of bad men. But on a poetic, cosmological level, he has done something far greater.
He brought back the sun.
As a Hierophant, acting with the sema of divine authority from Zeus, he has successfully turned the cosmic wheel. The slaughter of the suitors in the Megaron was the necessary ritual mechanism required to end the longest night. He has eradicated the blooming darkness, silenced the anti-mind, and forcibly brought back the sun.
I am floored by the scale of this, and we cannot talk about the restoration of order without talking about Penelope's role in this. She isn't just a passive prize waiting upstairs to be won. She has been holding off the chaos for 20 years with her own immense mental fortitude and trickery.
They are inseparable in this cosmic function. They're not merely a royal couple reuniting, they are co-agents of order. Penelope maintained the unbearable tension, weaving and unweaving her shroud, holding back the complete, irreversible collapse of the household until Odysseus could return.
She bought him the time he needed.
She held the line until he acquired the noos, the Hierophantic knowledge necessary to definitively restore the balance. One could not succeed without the other.
This has been a staggering journey. We started with the image of a man weeping on a beach, desperate to just go home. And by learning to read the architectural grammar of the text, the sema, the bothros, the telio, the noos, we've watched him transform into something else entirely.
A completely different figure.
He descended into the earth, learned the secret language of the dead, emerged with cosmic consciousness, and returned to his own home to execute a flawless, terrifying, inverted ritual to save his world from the longest night.
The paper summarizes it perfectly.
Yeah.
There is no Odyssey without the Nekyia, and there is no Nekyia without a ritual, which is then cryptically expressed and fulfilled in the Mnesterophonia.
It's all connected.
It is an extraordinary testament to the depth and resilience of oral tradition. It proves that generations of bards managed to preserve Bronze Age mystical logic, hiding it in plain sight within the verses of an Iron Age epic.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something to explore on your own that builds on everything we've talked about today. If the Odyssey, arguably the most famous foundational adventure story in Western civilization, is actually a cryptically encoded manual for a Bronze Age mystery cult, hiding its liturgical secrets behind the guise of a returning soldier.
What else is hiding?
Exactly. What else are we misreading? What other beloved childhood myths, fairy tales, or foundational stories are actually ancient blueprints for accessing the divine, just waiting for someone with enough news to decode them?
It makes you want to reread everything.
It really does. The next time you see a strange symbol in an old story, an apple, a spindle, or an oar planted in dry earth, ask yourself, is this just a prop, or am I looking at a sema?
Great question.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.